If I could do anything I wanted to, when the long day of work is over, laying in bed and reliving the struggles of the day over and over, I'd tune into Joey Reynolds and immediately become engrossed in his personality and his unique view of the human condition. I'd let him capture my mind with humor, with philosophy, interesting discussions with interesting people, as he pulls my mind away from my cares, as he sends tendrils of love across the dark emptiness of the night, reaching out. I'd let him ease my concern about myself by encouraging me to be concerned with the plight of others. That's what I'd do if I could do anything I wanted to.
Yeah, well, you can't do anything you want, not in this world, but you can really get away with a lot if you got money and power. And if you have government behind you, or if you have some sort of a lawyer, or if you have, well, I think essentially a strong mother who will go and kick someone's butt for you when you're in trouble as a kid. You know, I never had that. When I was a kid, my sisters used to fight my battles. My older sister always stuck up for me. And it was a bad thing because when I never learned how to fight my own battles. So every time I got into trouble, I would look for the person who was next to me to beat up somebody, and that person wasn't there. Now, Phil Carlo's here, and he's just making signs all over the place. He's the author of The Iceman. And in the studio, we have a friend. She's a very young lady, very beautiful young lady. Who's this lady we have with us, Phil?
Laura, my sidekick.
Your sidekick.
Partner in crime.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
For what? Writing together? Do you write together?
You know, it's actually a very interesting story. If I may briefly, she's the daughter of Eddie Garofalo, who was murdered by Sammy Gravano.
Oh.
And she's doing a book now on how her father was murdered and how Gravano got away and walked scot-free after doing that. So it was a double whammy. And we met recently, and we've become friends. She was kind enough to drive me down here. Last time I was on my way down here, I got hit by a cab, as you know.
Yeah.
So it's a very intense, dramatic story, and she's quite a lady.
Well, you know, welcome to the show. It's very nice to have you. You got to get real close to the mic in this place, though. You got to think radio, not television.
Right.
So how did you meet Phil?
Phil was actually childhood friends with my uncle.
Yeah, but how did you meet him?
They kind of reconnected.
Yeah. A mutual friend of ours passed away recently. It's one sad thing after another. And he called me up. I haven't heard from this guy in 40 years. We were best friends in grade school. And he told me I had already known about that. And I said, by the way, you know, I saw your nieces. They were suing Gravano because of the book deal, the money that he'd gotten. They were very upset about that with Ron Kuby. And I thought, God almighty, she looks so much like you. He said, yeah, you should meet them. And I said, great. So we had lunch together and we met. And that was a couple of months ago. And I heard the heartache and the pain and what they went through. I thought there's an amazing book here because it has a duplicity of the government and how these poor girls they lost their dad, who was murdered, shot down the street like a dog, then came back, they shot him again, and he got his freedom, which was doubly painful for them.
How long ago was that?
Oh, that was
when
what was the year?
It was years ago.
He was killed in 1990, but
So
then in 97, Gravano decided to write a book, so we were victimized again. I mean, he was getting away with murder and then writing his tale and profiting from it. So, you know, it was a lot to swallow. And at that point, I said, something has to be done. You know, the government let him go. They can't let him make money from murder.
Yeah.
So you not, in other words, when it first happened, you went through all of the grieving. And then the second time, you had to go through it again because he was made a hero in writing.
And he was released in less than 5 years.
That's the hero part.
Yeah.
Joey, needless to say, when her book comes out, you must have her as a guest. You put her on. She's got facts and names and dates and details. It's just an amazingly sad story. And the government, the federal government's doing this in every state of the union. One guy kills 6 people. He testifies against somebody that kills 10 people. They let the guy that kills 6 people free. Give him a color television. Give him better food. Don't give the guy his freedom.
Why do they do that?
Because murder is a political apparatus. The prosecutor that gets the most convictions or puts away somebody who's got front page headlines gets the glory, and often they go on to higher office. Rudolph Giuliani, Dewey. It's a long list of politicians who use the solving of crimes, the application of prosecutions as a stepping stone to higher office. And unfortunately, all too often, they're not really interested in innocent guilt. They're interested in getting their names in the papers. And the mafia always garners a lot of headlines. It's a very terrible. In my new book, which I keep alluding to but not telling you about, it's so much of that is about so much about of the new book is about that. But we're here to talk tonight about Richard Kuklinski.
The Iceman. But not only that, I mean, we're here to talk about your life is filled with seriousness.
Drama, pathos.
Yeah. Well, you're a very serious guy.
Yeah.
And we have things that could be handled differently in this society, and they don't require too much change. They require a little bit of thought and some compassion for survivors, for victims,
right,
and for people who would be under the gun. I mean, you told a very interesting story last time you were here about the Iceman and how he felt about pedophilia, and he was so dead against that. He murdered two gentlemen who were sodomizing a kid in the Chelsea area of New York. Did I hear that right? Was it?
Yes.
Am I correct?
No, actually, it was along the water. But they referred to it as the Chelsea where they were right along the Hudson River.
Yeah.
And you had somebody here that night who interrupted me and told me this thing about I'm making a 9-hour speech. He was all over me. I thank you for defending me that night. He was a step away from me punching him in the nose, if you want to know the truth. But yes, Richard is a good example of how abhorrent that crime is and how people even like him, who basically is, you can't get much worse than Richard Kuklinski, wouldn't put up with it. He not only killed those two guys, he eviscerated them and dumped them in the Hudson River. In jail, as an example, pedophiles, child molesters are not put up with. That play Short Eyes, which we discussed that night, is about a man who gets killed in the Tombs for the molestation of a 6-year-old boy.
Isn't that a curious piece of business, though?
It is, though, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a what we're talking about here, and every time you come here, is that my way. You got to use words, otherwise, you can't paint pictures. There's 3 areas of people. There's the mind, the body, and the soul, and sometimes the soul and the emotion is the same as the spiritual, but often. But the physical part is separate, and how I feel is not how I look.
Right.
But how I am is not necessarily how I feel.
Right.
So it's those moving parts, and we have to, the ideal person is the one who has all the beauty of all of this, but the centered person is the one who has the advantage of being able to walk through life gracefully. And not everybody can make it through without learning a lesson or without losing their life or whatever, having hardships.
Right.
So the thing is to try to be very, very centered. And I strive for that because I'm healthy enough to know that now. But I didn't used to strive for that. Right. So now with that in mind, I think a lot of times when you're here, we get into the psychological evaluation of someone. And you're never going to figure it out, are we? I say we. Well, I don't think we're ever going to figure out.
It all begins with conversation. It all begins with thought. It all begins with the expression of those things. That's how everything is. Everything is solved with an abstract thought, which gets externalized and ultimately becomes a path, a logic, a reasoning, a philosophy. A guy like the Reverend Sun Myung Moon, for instance, can vocalize on some thoughts he has and get control of a lot of people, which is not necessarily a good thing. A guy like Adolf Hitler also. So it depends who's saying what, when, where, and why. as to whether or not it's a good or a bad thing. Our thing has always been about shining light in dark places.
Yeah.
That's what you and I have been doing, I think, consistently. Joey, I love you, and I love doing the show, and I'll do it anytime because you're so open to those things, and not open to them necessarily out of magnanimity. You're open to them because you're really interested. You're open to them because you have a soul. And you should be commended for that, as I always say.
Thank you.
Right on, bro.
All right, now hold on for a second. We got to do some business here.
Okay.
All right. Phil Carlo is here, not alone, and we also have the Iceman's wife on the phone.
We do, Mrs. Barbara Kuklinski.
So I understand she's quite a lady.
She is quite a lady.
So we'll be right back.
Great.
Phil Carlo is here now. Phil is the author of The Iceman, and you got how many books you got? Phil, what do you got? 5 or 6?
7 books. 7. Yeah, 7 books.
What, you want to give us some titles here just for the sake of the Amazon.com people?
Predators and Prayers, Smiling Wolf, The Night Stalker, The Iceman. I have another book coming out soon, which I still can't talk about. And there's another book that will be out in about 2 months called Victims of Circumstance.
Which was the one that Robert De Niro licensed for a film?
Stolen Flower, about the abduction of an 8-year-old child who's sold into the world of white slavery and is used in child pornography. Her photograph ends up appearing in a magazine called Lolita, which offers children for sale. And all stories are written by pedophiles, for pedophiles, by pedophiles, and out of Holland. And the efforts of an American detective who was going to be De Niro to get the child back. And it enters that whole world in a very real, brutal way. And that's what got me involved in this whole thing about abused children and the Pandora's box that I opened up. And you and I have discussed this numerous times. But I didn't realize that, in a sense, there was an epidemic of it going on. As you know, you were a victim of child sexual abuse.
Yes.
And I came across it again in the case of the Iceman, Richard Kuklinski. Child abuse takes many different forms. It's not only sexual. In Richard Kuklinski's case, it came in the form of severe physical abuse and torment from the very early formative years on. As you know, and for your listeners' benefit, Richard Kuklinski saw his father beat to death his older brother when Richard was 5 and his brother was 7, laid out in a coffin, a cheap wooden coffin in a home. By the time Richard was 10, because of the beatings, I believe the father beat empathy, sympathy, conscience out of the boy, and he became filled with hatred, filled with anger, became a raging psychopath. Started murdering people when he was 14, 16 again.
I didn't know he started at 14.
Yeah, 14 was his first.
I didn't read The Iceman.
For his first killing. Yeah, and went on to become a efficient serial killer who metamorphosized into a contract killer.
How do you do that? You get hired by people?
Well, it's interesting. It's a good question. Thank you for asking it. Basically, what happened is the mob, he lived in the Hoboken, Jersey City area. There was a lot of mafia in that area. They got wind of him, how violent he was, how dangerous he was, that he was more or less somebody that kept his mouth shut. And they gave him a murder to do, and he did it. They gave him a second murder, which involved the bringing back of a body part and torture. He did that. He brought back the head. They asked for a finger. He brought back the head. And this is true, by the way, listeners. And from there, it was a kind of a marriage made in hell. And he worked more and more and more for them. And then Richard Kuklinski's story took a very, very odd, interesting turn. He met a woman named Barbara, who was 18 years old, and was a very good girl from a straight family, a nice lady, a virgin, not a loose woman. And they met out of pure happenstance. She got a job in a trucking company. He was working there at that point in time. They started talking. They started dating. He was a very good-looking man, a tall 6'6" guy. She brought him home to meet her family. They weren't crazy about the fact that he wasn't Italian. This is the nice proverbial Italian girl we've all heard so much about, but very rarely come upon. Although I think I have one sitting just to my right here.
She's very lovely, too. Very young and beautiful, I might add. Yeah.
But be that as it may, she ended up marrying Richard, and she spent many, many years with him. And she was married to him during the time that he was killing people on a regular basis, and she knew nothing about it. She didn't really believe even the charges against him until she heard in court her husband talking to a cop who the husband was planning to kill about murder and the largeness of how he did it and what he did and the way he did it. And she got up and she walked out of the courtroom that day, and she never went back, and she wouldn't really wash the hands of him. And I believe, she's here.
Yeah, well, we have her on the phone right now. Barbara.
Yes.
Hi, Barbara. How are you?
Hi, I'm good. How are you?
I'm sorry to not have you in the studio. I've been looking forward to meeting you, and I know that, I'd like to make eye contact with you.
Yeah, next time.
Yes, please. And you're such a well-recommended person. Phil's a very straight shooter about everybody.
Yes.
And he certainly doesn't play with anybody's feelings. So when I talked to him last time, he says, well, you're really going to like Barbara. She's really nice. But it's awkward,
Yes,
because
I agree.
it's tough when people don't know each other, for one thing, to ask personal questions.
Right.
And I think I'm too much of a gentleman to start asking you about your feelings with something that is so private, some of this is public, and I don't want my intention is never, and I'm just explaining this because I want you to know me quickly as as we can on the phone. I just don't like dragging people through their emotions, I don't think it's very...
Joey, if I may interject, I told Barbara all about you. She did listen to the show. She's completely comfortable with you. Yeah. Please talk to her as you would with me. She's a great, wonderful, soulful lady who was in a very, very bad marriage, couldn't get out of the marriage, and she'd be happy to bare her soul. Just ask her whatever you wish.
Well, what I wanted to know is I understand that your husband, I can call him your husband.
He's my ex-husband.
Your ex-husband. He had threatened to kill you and your child.
My children, yes.
How many?
3.
All 3 children, and you would be dead if you got out of the marriage?
If I even tried.
But that was not with knowing that he was a serial killer.
No, I didn't need to know that. I knew how violent he was, because he was violent and abusive to me for 25 years, and frightening, and I had no problem believing him. In fact, and he didn't tell me that. I knew that if he even had a clue that I was thinking of getting out of the marriage, I would be dead. But he told my older daughter that, I hope you realize if I kill your mother, I'll have no choice but to kill the 3 of you.
I can't leave any witnesses. You understand that, Merrick, don't you? Yes, Daddy. But Merrick, it'll be the hardest for me to kill you.
Right. Exactly.
You understand that, right, Merrick? Yes, Daddy.
Yes.
So there's a strange coldness in the warmth, or a strange warmth in the coldness. It's so bizarre.
It's more cold than warm, but yes.
There are 2 things that don't go together that are operating.
Yeah.
No, let me take a break here, okay, Barbara?
Sure.
For just a minute, we'll be right back. Joey Reynolds Show, Phil Carlo, author of The Iceman. Joey Reynolds Show from New York. Barbara Kuklinski is here, and she is the ex-wife of the Iceman, who was a serial killer. I think he murdered, 200 people or 100?
He actually murdered over 200 people.
200, yeah. Okay, I had it right. And Phil Carlo, who's spent so much time with him. I just want to review this a little bit.
Please.
You were 2 years in prison with him, right? Coming to visit him on a regular basis?
I did. I spent every weekend for about a year going out to Trenton State Prison. I spent about 240 hours interviewing him.
Knee to knee.
Knee to knee, because they force you to sit that way in the prison.
And he's 6'6".
A very big
Huge
dude, 320 pounds.
And could crush you with his hand,
Hands
perhaps.
the size of hand hock. I swear to God. As you know, I'm from Bensonhurst, Brooklyn. I was brought up amongst some of the toughest guys ever. But I felt that this man could reach over, take me, snap my neck as easily as breaking a toothpick if he had a mind to. I felt, too, that he could grab me bodily, physically grab me like by my knees and my neck and break my back. I had written some things in the book that I knew would upset him, like his abuse to Barbara, like the fact that one of their daughters was raped and she never told her dad, And I felt he might hurt me. He might say, "I read the book. I love the book. Come on out." But I was never going to go back to the prison when he read the book. And then he passed away in March. Barbara and I believe he was murdered, by the way, which is a whole other show. But suffice it to say, in the course of my interactions with him and with Barbara, I grew very close to Barbara. I managed to get Richard Kuklinski to trust me and like me.
Yeah. What was the turning point for that? I
told him about myself. I just sat and I looked him in the eye and I told him who I was, how I got that way, where I was brought up, and what made me become a writer. And little by little, he grew to like me. And he told me stuff he never told anybody. For instance, no one knew about the murder of his brother. No one knew many of the crimes he committed. And I just mined, and I got an awful lot out of him.
And excuse me, I never knew about his brother.
Did you go? Barbara?
One time it was he died of pneumonia. Another time it was he was shot in the street, but he trusted Phil.
Right, now, Barbara, did you go to visit him in prison?
In the beginning.
Well, how would that? This is what I'm most curious about, and pardon me for being so nosy, because that's a good word to describe
Please
it.
Be nosy.
I just want to.
Yeah, really.
Just as my instincts, When you went to see him after, he opened up because he had to in court, and now you know who he is.
Right.
And you knew some of the activity and disbelief. There's what do they call it? Suspended belief? Isn't that what they call it when we don't believe something?
Right.
So you're in prison now. Afterwards, you're visiting him. You sleep with this man. He's your husband. They're your children, and you're there and you're with him, and you're talking to him now differently because now you know something about him that it was his deepest, darkest secret, and it was and you know who he really is.
Right.
So how do you have that conversation? What do you ask him? You say, well, you start out with "you bastard." You got to start out with something like that.
Well, when he was still in Bergen County before the trials, and I said to him, is what they're saying? I said, it can't be true. He said, yes, it is, and more. And it was, Joey, 25 years of conditioning. The perfect family, the perfect house, perfect children, smile, smile, smile. So after 25 years, yes, when he was first sent to Trenton, my children and I went. And then...
Barbara, if I may interject something, what happened was the children wanted to see him. Barbara didn't want to see him.
No.
It's not as though Barbara was going out there to visit him.
Never.
The kids insisted on going, and Barbara went because she wouldn't let them go without her. That's how she came to visit him.
He wouldn't see them unless I was there.
Right, so that because she didn't. You get what I'm saying. It's not as though she went because she wanted to see him.
Right, but initially, when he was first of all, I never believed that he wouldn't somehow get out. That's first of all. So it took a while to heal, and some things took 20 years to heal. But I then, of course, stopped going. My younger daughter stopped going many years before. And then I would go, if Merrick wanted to go, I would go maybe once a year, then once every 2 years. But if she wanted to see him, I went with her to see him. And actually the conversation was about television, nothing personal, ever. There was nothing personal.
Joey, there was one time, forgive me for interrupting, Barbara, there was one time that I was in the house interviewing them, and he called to talk to her, and she spoke to him. And as she started talking, I watched her hands start trembling, I swear to God. And when she hung up, she was white like chalk, and her hands were shaking. I said, Barbara, he still has this effect on you. She says, sure. He does.
Sure.
He'll never go away. This is just, and I'm not complaining about it by any means, but this has brought it back. Many more nightmares now, than I was doing really well there for a while. If I said something he didn't like on the phone, or if he felt I had an attitude, I have 1,000 letters from him, and some of them are very frightening. One said, start making funeral arrangements for your son.
Oh, boy.
So it took a long... He was very frightening.
Well, he's a terrorist.
Yeah. Actually, worse than that, because... you see, at points in time, she thought about having him arrested. She thought about calling the police, and she, in fact, did call the police. And the police basically told her, Well, we can come pick him up. We can arrest him, but he'll be out tomorrow on bail. And she knew that when he got out, he'd come and kill her. And he told her that. She believed it.
Yeah.
He did things in front of her. Like, for instance, they had this table, this marble table that took 4 men to bring in the house, a very heavy table. He lost his temper one day over her not cutting the peanut butter sandwich properly. He picked up the table, he threw it out the front window in front of her, effortlessly. Another time he got angry, he ripped the kitchen cabinets off the wall. The carpenter came back, put the cabinets back up. He did it a second time. Another time, he ripped the kitchen sink off the wall, threw it out the back. He did this in front of her, and he did it in front of the kids. So he was actually a terrorist.
Sure.
I think, Joey, he wasn't really playing with a full deck.
No, definitely not. And I would, when I felt he was in a receptive mood, I would mention going to a doctor and perhaps getting help, because he, beat me, stabbed me, strangled me. I lost consciousness. I mean, we're talking major abuse. And I'm far from the only woman on earth that was ever abused, but I was abused by the Iceman.
Well, the sad part also, there's a lot of sadness in this, is that when we have a relationship with, and when I'm a victim, and there's a perpetrator, the perpetrator usually remains untreated, and the victim is looking for treatment. Mm-hmm. So we go to do all the therapy while the other person is acting out,
right?
And they're not doing anything about themselves. So that's the inequality of it.
Exactly.
So I want to ask you, how are the kids?
Okay, nightmares. Still to this day, my daughters are going to be 42 and 43. My son is going to be 38. Nightmares. They still, to this day, have nightmares. And any kind of confrontation is enough to just...
If I may put in my 2 cents, her kids are wonderful. I get to know them all well, and they're just lovely, grounded, funny. I'm sure they have issues as a result of being brought up in that home. But all things considered, they're so polite and they're so sweet. They've got great sense of humor. We've had numerous dinners together. When you sit down having dinner with them, all they're doing is cracking jokes. And I think they're just absolutely lovely, and Barbara should be praised for how well they came out. Mind you, they all went to Catholic school. They had the best upbringing. When I first met them, they were calling me Mr. Carlo. I mean, please don't call me Mr. Carlo. Call me Philip. Just amazingly polite.
And he never touched the children.
Never laid a finger on the kids. Yeah.
And he never interfered as far as anything I wanted to do, no matter what school I wanted to send them to, no matter what the tuition was, whatever I said where the children were concerned, he went along with. There was never a problem.
An interesting anecdote, if I may, in terms of him needing help, him needing psychiatric help. There was this thing he did that involved him taking marks, people who were marked for death, that had to suffer, that was specifically requested. 7 of these individuals over a several-year period, he took to caves he found in Pennsylvania filled with rats, and he left those individuals there to be eaten alive by rats, and he filmed it. And he's telling me this story about middle of my interviews with him. And I was always fascinated by these incidents because he spoke about them on HBO. And as soon as I sat down with him, I said, don't tell me all about the rats. But I waited for the natural time that occurred in the chronology of the story, and finally it came, and I was telling me about it. So, and I'm saying, well, why did you film it? I filmed it because I wanted to show it to the people that ordered the hits, to show that the mark suffered, and I would find out something about myself. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, I watched the films. I watched them over and over again to see my own reaction. And I said, why? He said, to understand why I didn't have a reaction. It didn't bother me. I didn't care. I watched them when my family was upstairs sleeping, eating popcorn on the couch downstairs. I said, really? Well, did you learn anything? He said, yeah, I did learn something. I learned that I'm different than other people. I learned that I needed help, psychiatric help. I said, interesting. Did you get any help, Richard? Did you seek any help? And he said, no, how could I? How could I go to a psychiatrist and say, I enjoy killing people. Can you help me?
We're going to take another little breather here. Philip Carlo is so powerful, all of this business. Barbara Kuklinski, and my heart goes out to your children because it's so hard to have the love that you richly deserve because you have a double standard. And the one standard is the one you said, and the other one was the one that he had on the side, I guess.
Right.
It's hard. It's just hard to talk about.
No, but you look way down.
It's hard to talk.
The weight of this is pulling you down. I see it.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's just, I have a couple of kids, and I relate. I relate.
Yeah.
Well, I'm with my older daughter this evening, and my son came by to see me for an hour or so, and then my son and my daughter went to the Halloween parade in the village.
Right. I was there. I just drove through it.
Yeah, crowded. I'm sure I had no interest. But I'm just saying, remain close, love each other very much. It was always my children and I. And I always said my children. I never said our children. He was just a donor.
A donor?
I raised my children. He had nothing to do with it. I think he wanted to be a good father. He didn't know how.
So you start by being a good person.
Yeah, exactly.
Right,
Well, he fell far short.
Let's take a break here for a second. Joey Reynolds Show from New York. Philip Carlo's here. He's always serious but poignant.
I got to write a comedy someday so I can come here and we can talk about something a little more lighthearted.
No.
I don't know if I ever will.
This is so important to put on the air because it's real.
Totally.
And it doesn't have that little reality television thing, where somebody's trying to make drama.
No.
This is real.
This is hardcore.
Now, we have a lady on the phone, Barbara Kuklinski, who is the Iceman's ex-wife because he's dead, for one thing.
And I was divorced many years ago.
You were. All right. Now, the kids are now 30, 40, and three children. Mm-hmm. And you have the three of you have each other.
Yes.
And there's got to be some sort of a bond that keeps you together for...
Together we're strong.
Yeah.
Like
exactly.
we were for all those years. As long as we were, the four of us were together, then we were strong. He was no part of that, and so that continues.
I asked him about his treatment of Barbara, his abuse of Barbara. I said, how did you feel about that? How did you feel afterwards? He told me he couldn't look in the mirror, that he hated himself for what he did. I mean, he knew that she told me some of what happened. He didn't know she told me all of what happened, and that I would ultimately write all of what happened. I mean, a good third of the book is designated to Barbara and his family life, for want of a better way to put it. But I honestly think he did love his family.
Oh, I agree.
And he
just didn't know.
He loved
how to go about it.
Well, he loved children to such a degree as when we talked about him killing molesters, killing rapists. Merrick, the daughter Merrick, was very sickly as a child, and we spent a lot of time in the hospital. Richard was there, sleeping on the floor, taking care of other children, buying other children medicine, bringing toys for all the children on the ward, not looking for praise, not looking for anything, just out of the goodness of his heart. There was an incident where a little girl who had terminal cancer, the family couldn't afford the television. They pulled the plug on the television. Richard got there. His daughter's crying. She's 8 years old. What's the matter? Oh, well, Daddy, the girl next door, they took her television, and it's so sad. And she's he didn't say a word. He went and found the guy to pull the plug, grabbed him by his collar, lifted him off the ground, to go immediately put that television back on. Here's money, and if I hear you take it off again, I'm going to throw you out the window. And the guy,
except he meant it.
And no one really did mean it.
Most people don't know that.
But out of his own volition, and just so
no idle threats. That's exactly right.
Oh no!
So what did he have in his head? That's an interesting angle. That idle threats. If you don't, this is someone who really says what they means what he says. So in the matters of love, which I mean these are the opposite, love and hate. But in the matters of love, did he mean what he said? And is that what we're hearing? That when he said something, he really meant it, and his head computed?
He could be the best husband, forgive me, Barbara. I know wasn't married and you were, but he could be the best husband in the world.
Right.
So romantic. He would take her to...
Everyone envied me, Joey. He was so good looking. He was so in love with me. He was so kind. The flowers, at least twice a week.
Well, tell him about when he took you to your favorite restaurants, what he did with the music.
Right. We'd go out on Saturday evenings and he wanted...
romance.
To be with me,
romance.
first of all, and the children. I mean, my girls were in their early 20s. One was engaged, the other one was going steady, and if he said on a Saturday afternoon, let's all go out to dinner, we all went out to dinner. They dropped whatever plans they had, didn't matter. And he was then, happy, content. We'd have a good time, and we would laugh. when we would go out, he would, I guess, call ahead because he loved Kenny Rogers' Lady. And whenever I walked into a restaurant, if there was, music, a pianist.
The music, her favorite music song was playing Lady. Her favorite flowers were on the table.
Right.
Her favorite wine was being chilled for her.
Yeah, very romantic.
Yeah.
Like I said, the good Richard, the point being here, though, Joey, is that in my mind, the bad Richard was right there.
Yeah, well, did he ever say, I'm sorry to you, like they always say? Love
No,
us?
it was always my fault. Look what you made me do.
No, I mean, after all of this happened,
No.
did he ever say, gee, Barbara, Barbara, I feel so desperate.
No, never.
No emotion in that area.
No, he would say, look what you made me do.
Oh,
or
boy.
if you bleed on the floor, I'll kill you. If you get blood on this rug, I'll kill you.
Well, boy, I just don't even know what to say. You get to the point where you can't figure anything out anymore.
Right.
You hear these kinds of
It
things.
was a very difficult 25 years. We were married 25 years when he was arrested.
We have a young lady in the studio tonight. Do you know that?
She heard.
Yes, Laura.
Yeah, and Laura, your dad was murdered, but he was a good guy, right?
Excellent.
Yes.
And he was murdered by a gangster, not a serial killer, but a gangster.
Interesting. Because Sammy Gravano killed her father. Sammy Gravano, also Kuklinski killed for Gravano. He killed a cop on Gravano's behalf, which is all an Iceman. Gravano got arrested for killing a cop, and he was going to go to trial. Richard was going to testify against him, and he was going away he would get gotten a death sentence. And one of the men that he killed was her father, Eddie Garofalo.
Now, Laura, how many kids in your family?
3.
Yeah, how old?
I have a brother who's
20-something?
39, and I have a sister who's 41.
And you're what? Are you 20-something?
I'm 33.
Oh, you look great.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Now, what are the scars? I mean, is it hard to have a relationship with another man? Trust someone? Trust another man?
Not so much that. It's just, people say as time goes on, things get easier, and it doesn't. Anyone who's gone through a trauma knows that. It doesn't get easier.
How do you feel after the government let him go, after knowing that he admitted killing your father? How do you feel about that?
Well, it just seemed to never end for me. We were just constantly being hit with another blow. First he was killed, then the government lets him walk in less than 5 years. Then he writes a book, and we're not able to. We weren't even able to serve him in the state of New York to sue him, for the book. So they just kept protecting him. It's hard, They've made him untouchable.
Who was the district attorney? Who was the prosecutor?
Well, the prosecutor who handled the Gotti case, which is ultimately what Sammy became, famous for,
right,
became a judge. That was Gleason.
Well, when you get this together, you'll come back and we do a whole show on this.
Sure.
And, of course, bring Phil because,
sure,
I can't do any of these shows without Phil. Phil's my guardian angel. There's nobody who has more integrity in these areas than Philip Carlo.
Thank you. It's really...
It's true. Isn't that right, Barbara?
Definitely.
I'm not just saying it.
Amazingly compelling.
Phil is an amazing man.
You're a one-of-a-kind guy.
Mm-hmm.
One-of-a-kind. Thank you, Philip.
Thank you, Joey.
The Iceman, that's one of his books. I mean, you just look his name up on Amazon.com or go to the bookstores. He's a pretty authentic writer. He is an authentic writer.
I'm the real deal.
I know you are. Well, you are. Thank Barbara. Barbara?
Yes.
Thank you so much for being yourself.
Thank you.
And I just really, I love you. You're great.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Maybe we'll meet.
Thank you, Barbara. And Phil, we'll see you, okay?
Thank you.
Laura, let a smile be your umbrella, but don't get a mouthful of rain.